Here we go. So, I was having the time of my life. Not long after the COVID pandemic, we were brought back to school, only this time with masks. I was a student in a private religious school and made a few friends I thought would stick with me for the rest of my life. I also lived in a nice small country with lots of islands, but I lived in the urban areas. It wasn't a nice city though. So was the school too. I lived in an area that was not too concerning to stay in, but also not too nice. There were always smoke coming from the exhaust of jeeps passing by. There would be trash and garbage bags in almost every street. There was also that one homeless man that I saw every day sleeping on our school benches, and despite the guards working for a Christian school, I saw them rudely push the man out of campus. I stood there in silence until my mom grabbed my hand and said, "Let's go home," in our native language. Like usual, we went with our common route to home, and I could sometimes notice the grip of my mom's hand slightly get stronger whenever we passed by suspicious streets. I didn't know why my mom was being overprotective at that time, but now I realize why. An unusually light skinned kid with a clean uniform. I used to be pale. Um, in, whoops, sorry. Only his mom, uh, a light skinned kid with a clean uniform, and only his mom there to protect him. The city, Manila, not only had a third world theme, but cases of murder and kidnapping were very popular despite COVID being somewhat present. We arrived home and our daily living space was no bigger than your usual living room. One bedroom, our kitchen, dining table for two, and our living room in one space. Then our bathroom and laundry room sort of branched into each other. It was a cheap condo we lived in until we would fly to America for a change, and to leave the mess of what happened in our family, something I blame myself for and something I can't personally tell. Fast forward to our last few days of staying in the Philippines. Despite living in a place like this, I wanted to embrace every single thing I could. Time passes by fast, and before I even knew it, I saw myself looking at my country beneath the clouds with no idea of how I would live in America. And so, flying away from home was my first tell. Summer heat, the cars passing by, the faces I knew, all of it stayed behind. And somewhere above the Pacific, it felt like a part of me was slowly getting ripped out. My old circle of friends, my family, and most importantly, my feeling of belonging. My old self didn't have a word for it back then, but from where I'm standing right now, it was grief. I didn't handle this quietly. Immaturity, disrespectful behavior, emotional outbursts, those that was my toolkit as a schooler in America. But every bad thing has an origin. Mine came from displacement, from losing friends that eventually forgot about me, from the slow grief of a childhood I could have spent more in the Philippines. I was trying too hard to fit in and to forget, but I had no idea how to regulate my emotions. I didn't want to tell anyone because I hated being vulnerable. So I put on a mask, never talked about it, and let it sit there. My behavior remained like this, and for a long time, I didn't even notice it. Then, somewhere in late seventh grade, I unlocked a new angle of my burden. I didn't know if it was one moment that led me to this, but I think it was a pileup. Bad habits I can't say specifically in this room, piling up after another. They rooted from self blame and grief. Then, they finally reached a way I could not ignore. I started observing the people around me. No grief, no self harm, or anything like that. I observed why they acted the way they did, how they moved on despite a traumatic experience, where their reasons came from, and most importantly, how could I do the same? I turned that same angle on myself. What I saw wasn't pretty, but it was honest. I acknowledged what was hard for me, the things I missed, and the fact that I couldn't go back home until who knows when. That honesty became my first step towards empathy and self discovery. So I picked up on a new hobby and I started writing. Not for anyone else, sometimes just to document moments, writing down how I feel, writing down how people acted. The journal became a place where I kept everything that went in on my mind, and a place where I could ask questions I was too hesitant to ask out loud. After finding the answer from one question I wrote down, who do I want to become? And what do I actually stand for? I answered the question with no limitations and told myself I want to be a student that thrived on curiosity, went to top colleges like MIT, Caltech, and Stanford, and standing up for my mom for being so strong throughout her life, for going through rigorous paperwork, trying to get us a better place to live, supporting my academic life in the Philippines when I didn't even realize it, and supporting my passion for creating and building things I've been proud of. I followed this conclusion I made up until my first year in high school. My academic transition wasn't clean though. Trying to develop new habits of studying wasn't always easy for someone that used to get 70s and even zeros on assignments. Shedding old habits like procrastination and emotional distraction is its own kind of war. But I pushed and I kept on making amends. Finally, during freshman year, I noticed myself being able to turn in assignments on time and sometimes early. Not skimming through articles, but learning them. Not beating myself up, but adapting, writing, and reflecting. There was this one moment during class when a friend of mine looked at me, laughed, and jokingly said, "Where's the Kenneth I knew?" And I smiled, not because he said a joke, but because this meant that my self-improvement was genuinely paying off and became even noticeable to my peers. Still though, I wanted to become better. Where's the good in an engineer if he can't speak in public, work in a team, build new connections, or in general, be the type to network with a lot of people with one project in mind? This is the moment when my school announced a program that would give 2 high school credits upon completing it. I thought it was a steal. I thought it was just another program to put in my list of extracurriculars or a resume. I asked my counselor to email me the details, link, and everything about the program. I looked at their website and I was like, FFI, Friends Forever International? At first, I thought the name was cheesy, but when I read more about the program, it all made sense. It was a program for people to join internationally, and it's free, and most importantly, it aligned with the values I was striving for: public speaking, networking, team building, and cooperation. I remember myself moving my mouse to click the Apply Now button, and now I'm here standing in front of an audience doing something I never thought I would do, openly sharing my life story. So I'm here today because of the choices I made and the presence of FFI. I believe everything I've been building quietly and privately needs a place to grow outward. I've already learned how to look inward, and this is the first time I'm choosing to step outside my comfort zone with purpose. I was once that kid on a plane watching home disappear beneath the clouds with no guidance to self-discovery. I'm still in progress, but I'm no longer lost or scattered. Every journal entry, every version of myself I've had to outgrow, it's all been pointing towards one direction, and that is exactly where I want to go. Thank you.